All right, I want to do a thought experiment, something that has been kind of coursing through my mind over the last few years, and I want to share it, see if it might be as useful to you. Maybe not even the word useful is the proper one, but I thought I'd share it. So imagine you are starving. Not starving in the sense that you're about to die, but you are absolutely hungry. The only thing you can think about is food. It is ruining your mood and your day. As you're driving down the road, you see a friend walking on the sidewalk. You see that it's safe to pull over, and you stop to say hi. You tell your friend that you're hungry, and they say, well, I'm assuming you're getting ready to go to McBurger. And you say, you mean McDonald's? And they say, no, McBurger. You know what McBurger is. We've all had McBurger. You had McBurger when you were 15. Don't you remember? And you skeptically say, I remember having a burger when I was 15, but I didn't know whether or not it was. They insist, how could you even question? It had to have. There's no way you could question that was not McBurger. McBurger is absolutely the most incredible thing you will have ever eaten. If you eat this, you will never go hungry again. It is the best burger you'll ever have. There's no mistaking it. And so you're still a little puzzled. I'll come back to this point in just a moment. Well, your friend says, luckily, there is a McBurger exactly 3.02 miles straight ahead. The only way they allow entrance is if you drive the rules of the road along the way. And there's a lot of police officers that are guarding this place throughout the trip. So if I wanted to make it, if you want to make it, you need to make sure that you adjust the way that you drive. You have to follow the rules of the road. And so you say, okay, 3.02, and they say, yeah, trust me. I can't believe you don't remember that, but once you have it, just call me. I guarantee you you will remember exactly how good it was. And so you agree. You're like, you know what? I am hungry. A great burger does sound good. So you thank your friend, you roll up the window, you reset the odometer. You're at 0.0 miles. You put your phone in the docking station. You allow the do not disturb while driving to remain on. Your mom calls you, and you're prepared to let it go to voicemail. You look at the speed limit. It's 45 miles an hour. You're going 44. You just got to make sure that you have this thing that everyone that you have had around you since birth has told you about. So you're ready. You're at 2 miles. You're getting a little anxious. You're really excited to have this thing. And you start thinking, she said, all I need to do is follow the rules. Okay. You do a double check. My doors are locked. My seatbelt's on. Phone's still there. Check. I'm still driving the speed limit. You know what? What the heck? I can go 45. That's the actual speed limit. There's no need to overcompensate. Okay. I'm at 2.5 miles. I'm almost there. 3 miles. Your heart starts beating a little faster. Your stomach growls. You are absolutely ready. 3.01. 3.02. That's strange. There's no McBurger. On top of that, you didn't even see any police officers along this entire trip. And you're a little upset. It's like, well, that's really annoying. Why would my friend give me such a specific number? 3.02 is way too specific. They were so certain that this restaurant existed. They were so certain that it was going to be exactly right here. Well, now I'm at 3.05. There were no turns along the way. And they even told me if there were, that I wouldn't need to take any. It's a straight and narrow path. I think you know where I'm getting at this. So back to the 15-year-old experience. You had a moment when you had tried a burger. You were 15, and your friends all handed you this thing. The packaging was gone. They had no proof of purchase. There was no wrapper. It was just a burger, and they handed it to you. And it was a fantastic burger. You do remember really enjoying that burger. but you didn't know for sure that it was from McBurger. There was no way for you to do it, but your friends were all so ecstatic about your experience of it that you confirmed that it was just based on that confirmation of their excitement and of the fact that it genuinely was the best burger you'd ever had. Flash forward, let's just say 5 years. In my case, it's been 10. I'm 26, getting ready to turn 27. My experience with this so-called burger was 11, almost 12 years ago. So now I've got a question. Do I continue driving or do I stop? There is a Wendy's to my left, but my friend said not to veer off this straight and narrow path. Well, okay, fine. It's possible that they were slightly mistaken on the directions. Maybe it was 4.02 or 2.03. Well, no, it couldn't be that because I would have passed it. Well, I'm going to trust my friend because they've never led me astray before. So now I'm at 4 miles. I'm at 5 miles. I've doubled the distance. I'm at 6.04 miles. Now I'm getting hangry. I don't quite understand why there's no way that they were lying. There's no way that all of my friends were lying. Is there a chance that maybe they all had this burger that was unwrapped? Maybe it was always McDonald's all along. Maybe there is a secret ploy from the McDonald's corporation that is trying to get people to think of a different business. Seems a little unlikely. Seems like a lot of people would have to be in cahoots on that, but I'm getting a little hungry and I'm not really thinking too straight. Okay, 1 more mile. I'm at 7. 1 more mile. Come on, I can't give up. My friend was so certain. My whole life has pointed to this moment. There's no way that 15-year-old experience was for nothing. Okay, well, I think it's time to ditch the metaphor. If you couldn't tell, McBurger is God. And the straight and narrow path, following the rules of the road and doing what any Christian should do, is the obvious advice that you are given when it comes to how do I seek and know God. Well, some people will argue that it's not about your works, and so if you make it about your works, then of course you're not going to find God. And then other people will say if you don't do anything and you're just sitting there waiting for God, like the man with all of the talents who buried his gold, well, you're not likely to find him there either. So you're in this weird mix and match, try to figure out what the heck this means. It's not about what I do, but it also is entirely up to me. Well, what the heck does that mean? How in the world am I supposed to juggle that? If I'm not doing enough, then I'm accused. If I am doing too much, then I am guilty. How does one make up for this? How does one balance this impossible balancing line on that just feels completely unbelievable, especially as the miles go on? When I was 15, I was forced by my dad to go on a missions trip. I say forced because I actually was, and I actually am not upset with my dad about this. I'm really glad he did. What the heck did I want? What the heck did I know when I was 15 years old? It's just funny, and I like to point out the fact that I was forced because he said, hey, do you want to go on a missions trip with me to Colombia? And I said, no. And he said, well, too bad. So it's funny. Thanks, Dad. But on that trip, I had months to prepare. I had to save up, I believe, $1,600. I didn't have a job, and so fundraisers that were from the church were the only way for me to pay for this. So I got to know some people. There was a man named Trent Hepburn. He really stood out to me. His father had died, and he seemed way too happy for all of the tragedy that had overtook him. And I was suspicious of it. Suspicious in the sense of what in the world could make this man not hate God or not hate his own suffering. So That was interesting. I grew up in a Christian home, but there wasn't really anyone that I saw that I wanted to be like. God was essentially a harsh judge coming from the father of the home. And I did not want any part of it. So hence the reason I said no on the missions trip. Well, what happened next was I continued to raise the money. I got to know people. I knew that they all had aspirations of my conversion, and I did not like that. I knew that they had their highest hopes that this trip was going to change my life, and I was I was determined to prove them wrong. Well, the trip comes up, the money was saved, and there was a moment that was strange. It was the third night of the trip. I believe it was a Wednesday. Tuesday night. It might have been Tuesday. It doesn't matter. The first night that we all hung out, the adults and the teenagers separated, and Trent started to share a story. And he started talking about what God had done in his life. And I was too overwhelmed to not say anything, and I had come to appreciate him, and so I told him that. He said, I don't understand how you can be so grateful and happy, but I appreciate it. And of course, as I said it, I started to cry. And what does that mean when the Christians see someone crying? Oh my goodness, it's a vulnerable soul. Geno has a heart. Look out, guys. God is on the move. Well, who knows? I definitely did cry, and my heart was sensitive, so I could just see the hope in their eyes when it happened. Well, the next day, everyone decided to have a prayer meeting. This is after we all went out and we did some of the missionary work that we had, cleaning up schools and doing performances for the children. And that night everyone was praying. I was not really prepared for this. I did not like this. I did not like the hours and hours of people talking to a God that, at least in my experience, did not exist. So, to keep my reputation in order, I didn't want people to think that I was this absolutely anti-God, terrible child. So I pretended to pray, and I pretended to close my eyes during the worship music. And I was a terrible... It's funny, but when we finally, after what felt like hours, decided to circle up, we started praying. It's just like, of course, they have to start praying now, even though that's what they've been doing. Now we're just praying not to the words of music, but our own words. Hoorah. Well, that seemed to last forever, and during that moment I would say random words that, as long as my mouth was moving and sounds were coming out, I was fine with looking like I was praying. Well, I, to my relief, made it through that moment, and then, as it seemed like wrapping up, the pastor said, "There's one more thing I want to pray for." And I knew exactly what he was going to say. And he said, "There is someone that I know that God is wanting to make a difference and a change in his heart." And so I remember thinking, if he calls me to the center of this circle, I swear, Geno, can you come to the center of the circle? Well, I can't say no. I guess I could have. And so I step forward reluctantly, and he looks me in the eyes, and he is one of the people, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but it's one of those moments that when someone looks you in the eyes and it feels like their eyes are looking straight into your soul. That was the experience that I had. And he said, "Geno, if you would just let him, God would give you an influence beyond what you could possibly imagine, and a relationship with him that would make people jealous." And I don't remember what those words meant to me, but they've definitely stuck. So then everyone surrounded me and they prayed. And they all laid their hands on me, and my discomfort and my, I don't want to say hatred, but my anger dissipated. I felt a calm in the storm, almost like the feeling that you have after having cried for 2 hours, the sense of peace that you have when you finally let it all out, finally getting to feel understood by someone. It perplexed me and overcame me, and I started to cry. And I felt peace. I felt like it felt strange. It was very strange. And so I remember thinking, well, God, if this is you, I want more of it. And so I came home. The first thing I did when I came home and saw my mother was I remember this explicitly. I got out of the car and I apologized to her for being a terrible son. And I hugged her and I said I was sorry. And a lot changed. I broke off the friendships that I had of people that were that I was stealing with from Walmart. Well, they were the ones who introduced me to stealing. My friendships began to expand, and my pastor asked me to be a part of the design team for the youth church. I had never done anything with Photoshop or Illustrator, but it blew my mind. I remember using Illustrator to Photoshop Spider-Man on a separate image and just thinking I was the most badass person that I had ever seen. And so my life genuinely turned around. It changed. And I had a extremely positive effect that went on for about 3.5 years. The amount of friends that I had, the amount that I cared for people, the mission that I felt that I had to share the same thing with others. I was very open about my faith at school, and even in college school for high school, I was very open about it. So what happened? Well, at least at the time, McBurger was real. But questions started to come up, and I didn't know how to answer them. And they weren't that big of a deal, but they started very subtly. I can't remember the specific one where it started, but there is something that I have written that I am going to read. I don't prefer to read text. I think that I prefer to try to ad-lib, but some of these questions aren't easy to remember at the time, and this is something that I feel is worth sharing. So here's an example of some of the questions that started showing up. Before stepping out, I started to ask some questions. Was this real? Has everything I've been through real? Are all of these people telling the truth? Are they simply naive? Is this music psychologically manipulative? It seems convenient that the church has scripture requiring 10% of everyone's income. It seems are people's testimonies trustworthy? Is some of this confirmation bias? Are people falsely seeing only what they're looking for? Does that make it fake? Why haven't I seen a miracle? Are the stories that the pastors share true? What about the teenagers who insist that they have seen a miracle? Are they in on this conspiracy? Why won't God talk to me? Why haven't I heard his voice? Is he real? Am I doing something wrong? No, I couldn't be. Well, what if I am knocking? What if I am asking? What if I don't know his voice? Is the problem me or God? Why don't my friends and leaders like these questions? Why don't they have answers? Why am I the problem for being honest and asking? Why does a being that created the entire universe, whose love and limits know no bounds, need his ego stroked by me singing to him and telling him that he's good? If this is supposed to be a relationship, why doesn't he reciprocate? Why is it that I see people so unstable, more so than me, become immediately uplifted by the words of a song or sermon? Do they truly believe if they can't keep their act together without someone telling them that everything is going to be okay? Why do I admire my life more than most others? Pastor Jason and his relationship with his wife, Pastor Walt with his humility, they seem real. What about everyone else? They seem to only say exactly what they're being told. Copy and paste. They don't seem real. If God is fake, how can this continue to exist for thousands of years? Well, the Muslims have. That's strange. There's a Bible verse that says that anything that isn't from God will not last. Well, what about the Muslims? That's interesting. The rabbit hole of Wonderland doesn't end. I recently have discovered something about rationality. It knows no limits. It has the ability to dissect something with the finest scalpel. It can, in fact, take you to Wonderland. But Wonderland is full of dark places. Here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in the same place. That aside, those questions are tough. Maybe I could let one slide, heck, maybe even 10. But 50? 100? That's not even the full list. It's the best I could do in one sitting without flooding the engine. How blind should you have to be? You see a desert and they tell me not to look at the sand. The more I asked, the further I went. I was given reasons, genuine reasons to leave. I was not appreciated for years of service. I was not pruned and tended to. My potential was ignored and pushed down without explanation or discipline. My house, which I thought was on rock, sunk deep into that very desert. I was glad to be rid of those blind, ignorant, and in my estimations, weak people. So, as I read that, the first thing that I feel an objection would be coming up is, well, it's obvious that you were hurt by the church. Are you sure you're not projecting that on to God? My answer is I'm pretty stinking sure that the answer is no. When it came to me mentioning the fact that I was not appreciated, what happened was when I was 19, I was promoted to a manager position at Panda Express. I was really proud of that. I was 18 at first, and by the time I passed the training, I was 19. I was a little bummed. I wanted to make it before I turned 19, but I was really proud of that. I knew I was young, and I knew it was a big accomplishment. I was grateful to be trusted with that giant amount of responsibility. And so what was interesting was my boss and his boss and a lot of the managers around me, before I actually got the promotion, were consistently pointing out the fact that why was I still just a person working at the front counter? Why was I not a manager? And they saw that potential in me, and they poured a lot into me. My boss gave me a challenge to run a store at a mall location, and I apparently passed because he offered me an assistant manager role, and then within a week he offered me a general manager role. So something that I was doing apparently was working, and I was really happy about that. At the same time at the church, what was going on was after a while of not being able to be on the worship team, which, granted, I don't know if I should have been on there. I don't know if I guess I shouldn't shortchange myself. I have a decent singing voice, but if that singing voice wasn't what my pastor wanted at the time, that is absolutely fair. And even if it was, I don't deserve the position. So I waited, and once the pastor left, the new pastor allowed me to join it. I was actually very grateful. I was really excited. I was finally able to sing. I was terrified nervous anytime I was on stage. I had not gotten past the self-conscious aspect of my singing, something that I still haven't overcome. But I remember one day specifically that really, really upset me. I had the leadership team say, "Hey, we need to talk with you." And it was just me and 3 others. There's the head youth pastor and 2 of the top leaders of the youth church. And they said, in this year, we really want to see you mature. And I said, okay, what ways do you want to see me mature? And they said, well, no, just in general, we want to see you mature. I said, well, do you have any specific examples where I'm not mature? Anything that you'd like to see come out of me? It doesn't really seem very helpful to tell me essentially that I'm not mature or that I need to mature. I don't think I said it quite that explicitly, but I did try to inquire about what they were looking for. And they still kept it vague, saying, we just want to see you mature. I have a feeling that I know what they were hinting at. Now, looking back, I was very young and immature and narcissistic and conceited and had a big head on my shoulders, and I needed to mature at the age of 19. Absolutely. But it was not helpful to be told criticism without knowing where to go. And that really bothered me. So another thing was I was in charge of some of the creative work, and I was given feedback saying that it wasn't appropriate, saying that it was too childlike. I disagreed with that decision, but I eventually decided to set that project down. I did not feel like I was compatible with what the pastor wanted for that group, so I stepped that down. The point is, I felt like I was not appreciated on almost anything that I did. It felt more of a consistent warning or push down than anything. And so when I was consistently getting promoted and given proper feedback at my job, it was really difficult for me to not feel like this was a complete waste of time. But I knew that this was a spiritual thing and I needed to take this seriously, so I decided to endure for a bit. Well, I'm trying to think of where to even begin. I don't think this story is completely, I don't want to fill in too many details. Panda Express offered me a position in another state. By the time that I had that offered to me, I was ready to step down. And so when I went to my pastor and said, I'm considering stepping down from being a small group leader, they said, don't worry about it. You can be done this week. And that kind of tipped me over the edge. I had dedicated my heart to these young men for years. I loved these kids. I absolutely loved them. And when I said I was considering stepping down, it was therefore no longer an option. It was already decided just by the mere fact of that I had the idea. That bothered me. But even still, the reason that I say, am I sure that I'm not projecting these things towards God? I knew that this was just something that people could be prone to making mistakes at. And not even that, I could be wrong. And I made sure that my bitterness did not project towards anyone, that I could keep it at bay and that I could make sure that I wouldn't learn the wrong lesson. I had seen too many people leave the church before and go on a wrecking ball agenda of destroying anyone in their path that was Christian, and I did not want to be that. So I felt like my head was on pretty clear. Well, during that time, my parents also were getting a divorce. That was one of the most difficult things that I ever went through, and I thought that I had a chance at keeping my parents together. It was the most important thing that I felt I could set myself to do. I've always been decent, well, at least I think I am, at being a mediator. So I tried to get my parents in the same room to talk civilly towards one another. I tried to talk with my dad on one side and tell him what I saw, and talk with my mom on her side and tell her what I saw. I tried to see if there was something that could be done, that it wasn't too late. Well, unfortunately, it was. And when I took the position to South Dakota for Panda, I had left the church, and my parents decided officially to get a divorce. By the time I moved back from South Dakota, the house that I grew up in for several years was already sold, and I did not get to see it for a final time. That was not easy, but one of the things that did ring true to me that I thought was curious was, why is my life not completely falling apart the moment that I left the church? Well, my life did fall apart, but I know that that was not because I left the church. What broke my heart the most was that I failed to keep my parents together. And it has taken me years to no longer identify as the person who failed, to no longer see that that is only who I am. But that was not due to the fact that I left the church. My parents were already separating. And so the depression that came after me leaving and going to Sioux Falls was a combination of depression, separation from family, failure, and an overburdened workload. So I know some people would argue, well, why can't you just tag on and a lack of God? I could, but I honestly do not feel that that is an appropriate response. It does not seem like that was the reasons that I was juggling through what I was juggling through. So, fast forward a few years, I never went to church while I was in South Dakota. I was there for 9 months. I moved back. I still decided to go to church. Actually, I did not decide to go to church. When I moved back, my dad was nice enough to let me live in his basement, and he said, the rules of living here is you have to go to church at least once a week and you have to pay rent. Okay? Well, that was the rules. So I went to church. Didn't feel anything, didn't believe anything, still had all the same questions, and man, did my criticisms and my questions escalate. When it came to the questioning of the psychological abuse of music, that definitely escalated. To watch people go from having an okay mood to just being overly swept with joy at the sound of a piano and the convenience that that piano played the moment that the altar call came. After a beautiful orator and a sermon that would lead you to tears, you then play the piano and you ask people, hey, do you want some of this? And I could not help but question how many of these people are persuaded just by that piano. And I remember thinking, I've always thought that I was going to be a pastor for some reason. I've had people say that over me for years. I remember thinking, if I am ever going to be a pastor, I would like to see what it would be like if we did an altar call without the piano. Why do I need to soften people into the mood? Why do I need to coerce them into making this decision? Why do I need to close people's eyes, have them close their eyes so that the people aren't embarrassed of their faith? Doesn't the Bible clearly say that if you're not willing to state your faith in front of anyone, that Jesus will not state his knowledge of you when you stand before him? That was, a lot of these questions just continued to escalate because I was no longer really believing, but I was there. I had to be there. So, what happened? Well, I met my now wife, and I shouldn't even say met. What happened was I met her while I was in church. I thought she was very attractive, and I started to get to know her. And when I started to get to know her was when I knew I was leaving the church. And I knew just by talking to her how important this faith was to her, how real it was to her. Just by the way she talked about demons and spiritual stuff, I knew that this was very real. So I disappeared. And I came back when visiting family from South Dakota, and I saw her again, and I started talking to her because I couldn't help but fall for how beautiful she was. And so then I get to know her, and I start hanging out with her for a little bit again. And then the same conclusion comes up where I know that I have to face the question. If I am with her, I'm going to have to hear this constant spiritual talk. And on top of that, I would likely just keep her from following that faith. Well, that's not an option, so I disappear again. I did that 3 times. The 4th time I tried talking to her, she ended up texting me and saying, please don't talk to me again. Fair enough. It might have helped if I explained myself rather than just stopping all communication. But what happened was I moved back. My wife's best friend saw me and they were doing a vlog, and she asked if I could help. I was pretty savvy technologically, and she said, hey, could you help us with this podcast or this video vlog that we're doing? And I said, it's probably not a good idea. She said, why not? And I was like, well, she did ask me not to talk to her again. And she said, oh no, that's complete nonsense. Nia-chan. And she calls her over from across the church. And I remember thinking, what the heck are you doing? You're such an idiot. And so then Nia-chan comes up and says, and Billy says, hey, Geno offered to help, but we were wondering if that would be appropriate. And she was nice and said yes. Well, great. Now I'm stuck. I had experience of stepping in on a relationship that I was asked to be left alone, and it didn't turn out good for me, so I was not looking forward to how this was going to turn out. Well, that night there was a hangout. Billy once again invited me, and I was like, not a good idea, and Nia-chan indulged me. So we talked. Why am I sharing this when I'm talking to you about God? Well, one of the deals, I shouldn't even say deals, but I told her that night, because we talked throughout the whole night. It was just the 2 of us. And I told her that night, if she let me pursue her, that I would marry her. I was a little forward. I was very forward. And I knew that threw her off. She called a pastor that she grew up with, and he said, well, what's his relationship with God like? And she told me that this was not going to work if I wasn't at least trying. And so I did. I agreed. And I told God that I was not going to question him anymore. I wasn't going to ask him to do anything for me, to prove himself to me. I was going to be faithful. I was going to stick to this no matter the cost. So I tried, and she agreed to marry me. And we did get married. Still are. And it's been 3 years of marriage, 4.5 years since telling God that nothing could change my mind. And it's still a silent room. It is still a unresponsive lack of relationship. Well, at least on his end. And the questions, not only have they not been answered, but more have come. I know that one of my friends is going to, upon hearing this, know exactly what I'm talking about, because I've said this many times. But if he says, ask and you shall receive, knock and the door will be opened, seek and you shall find, my sheep will know my voice, then why the hell is the door not opening? Am I not finding? Is he not answering? And don't I know his voice? It does not add up. The analogy that I brought up with the McDonald's thing is probably my favorite way of explaining this. What have I done along the way that could answer some of the questions and skepticisms that I have been accused of? Well, I can't claim to have been perfect in this, but I'm going to plead my best case. What I did was I decided to go through the checklist. I did the straight and narrow path, trying to find my 3.02 mark. I should have done 3.16. That would have been way better. The John 3:16, it would have tied it all together. Missed opportunity. Oh well, can't turn back now. Maybe for future versions of telling this story. So, I had never read the Bible before. I decided to do the 1-year Bible, and I stuck with it. I have read the whole Bible. Anytime there was an altar call that I felt could be something that could apply to me, I always made sure to go up. I should even state that by me pleading this case publicly, I understand that this is probably going to undermine some of the good things that I have done. I may be looking for a pat on the back. I know that it is comforting when someone says, "Hey, you've done a good job." So if I am doing that, I fully acknowledge that that's entirely probable. Why do I need to tell the world of all these things? But to give myself some of the ability to be proud of what I've done, there are things that I refuse to tell people of what I've done. I do take that verse seriously that says, "Do not pray on top of a mountain for everyone to hear. If you're fasting, put oil over your face so that no one may know." I think whether or not God exists, there is something that is important to make sure that, why am I doing what I'm doing? Would I be willing to do it if no one knew? There are things that I am not going to be sharing in this for that very purpose. But I'm going to try to illustrate this point just because of what I'm hoping. I don't specifically know what I want from this podcast, but what I'm hoping it can elaborate in this conversation or future conversations. Anytime there was an altar call, I went up if it could directly apply. I remember one night specifically, there was a pastor that came from IHOP, the International House of Prayer, not the Pancake House. And they, unfortunately, I didn't get a serving of spiritual food or breakfast food. I went to the altar literally crying 2 days in a row. Maybe not crying 2 days in a row, but I went up to the altar 2 days in a row. Now, I remember seeing my pastor, who appeared to be having some moment with God, and his wife did too. And I remember just thinking, God, why do they get refills? And I'm just looking for one. I just want to know you. I don't care what it is, but I need to know you're there. And it was very hard to not become bitter at the sight of someone that I already knew had experienced God. But I still shut that thought away and decided I will not allow that to corrupt my pursuit. And I kept going. I finished the Bible. I went to small group. I was honest about my pornography addiction and worked my butt off to try to get free from it. Something that is still a challenge that I am still pursuing. But the point is, there was no stone that I allowed to be left unturned. There were no things in my private life that I was trying to keep hidden. There were no conversations that I was trying to avoid. There was no moment when I refused to look for God. When someone asked me if I wanted to do something or recommended a book, I would do it. Why? Because if there's a chance that God is trying to meet me in that place, and I refuse, then that's on me. So I kept going. I read the books. I did everything I could. And every time a thought came up of how long are you going to keep going? It's been more than 3.02 miles, and you still have not found him. How long will you keep going? I still set that aside and said, God, I gave you my word. I'm not going anywhere. So I got pretty down. I was not very happy. I was married, and I still kept pursuing, kept praying with my wife, kept trying to lead in the way that I thought that I should. But I had no meaning in my life. There was very little that I could care for. And I did not know what to do. So, one day, while we were living in my brother-in-law and sister's basement, I tied an electric extension cord, and there was a beam at the ceiling, and I wrapped it around my neck, and I sat there leaning my weight on it, still not jumping, but I wanted to, and I went to a doctor to ask for antidepressants, and I was given them, but it wasn't enough to keep me going. And so I wanted to talk to someone. I needed to talk to a therapist, and there was a therapist that I knew at the church. And so I asked him for advice, and I told him everything that was going on. And, they were all great questions, all of them. Of course, no one had the answers for them, but that's fine. I don't expect people to have the answers. I felt that anytime I explained my case, that no one could answer for me, which was fine. I kind of expected that. It was annoying, but it was fine. So I told him everything that I was struggling with when it came to the idea of God, and he was very understanding. But then I said, I'm also struggling with porn, and I want to get away from that. And he said, oh, now it all makes sense. You are not going to be able to find God until you fix this porn addiction. And I remember thinking, if God is not answering me, although I have I have broken myself to get rid of this. I have humiliated myself to get rid of this. I have added porn blocker after porn blocker, admitted whenever I made a mistake. I did not allow it to go hidden. I went to small groups that talked about it. I had conversations about it. I had friends that held me accountable to it. My wife was aware of it. We were trying to get free of it. If that was not enough, if me going from once every 2 days to once every 2 to 3 weeks was not good enough for God to talk to me, I remember thinking, well, screw you. If your expectation is perfection, and that's why you won't talk to me, that's ridiculous. Now, I remember thinking, I know someone's going to say that is just not biblically sound. I've had people apologize saying, I'm so sorry, Geno. He was not accurately representing Jesus in that moment. Okay, whatever. He thought he was, and you think that you are. How do you know which one is correct? Unfortunately, that comes to who translates which verse which way. But that's fine. I was not angry with him. I knew that he meant well. So he recommended another thing. And I was just about at my wit's end for another recommendation when it came to spirituality. What in the world could you have to offer me that I have not tried already? Oh, he said, deliverance. You should do deliverance. What is deliverance, you might ask? It is breaking the soul ties that you may have from any sexual experience that you've had. It is breaking any spirit that could be bound to you that you were unaware of. Many people, they claim, have found great freedom from this. Well, the same question applied. I had always had a really bad taste in my mouth when it came to the idea of this, but I asked myself the same question. If this is what God was planning on meeting you to, if you have gone this far and you're just going to give up because you don't like the idea of what it sounds like, because you didn't like the advice from whom it came, are you really going to not take this chance? I couldn't answer no, so I signed up. It asks some interesting questions. It asked if I had ever played the game Fable, and if I would, if I had ever played the video game Fable, and I said yes, and I would gladly play it again. I love Fable. It is a fantastic video game. Well, I don't know if that's the reason that this story's turned out the way it did, but I guess someone may agree that it is. They asked more questions than just that. They asked about sexual experiences. They asked about, was I born of marriage out of wedlock, which turns out I was. Was I... just questions that I had never asked. I had asked my mom, were you guys married when I was conceived? They said no. It's like, oh, interesting. So I come on that day, and there's two gentlemen that I know, one of them whom I know. And they are excited. They are so excited. And they ask me why I'm there. And I say, I don't know why I can't hear God, but it doesn't seem like he's there. It feels like this is all a sham. It feels like this is something that just doesn't work. I don't feel like it applies to me. I feel like either God is not interested in me. I explained what was actually going on, and they said, whoa. The spirit of the Antichrist. They said the spirit of Antichrist. But the spirit of Antichrist is all over you right now. We need to pray. Okay, they prayed. And they prayed, and they prayed, and they prayed. And they asked how I was doing. Eventually, I stopped sharing my questions. Why? Because they translated my questions as the spirit of Antichrist. How someone's supposed to answer to that, I don't know. But what's ironically funny is the fact that afterwards, it's not even funny at all. I shouldn't even joke about it, but afterwards I had decided I was not going to tell them how I felt because I did not want this to continue. It had been 2 hours of praying. I am done. They said, you should see yourself now. You look so different. You look so light. It's night and day difference compared to what it was. And the guy said, yeah, it was getting pretty crazy earlier. And I just remember thinking, if that was crazy, have you ever seen The Exorcism? I just didn't understand. Granted, I haven't seen that movie either, but I remember thinking, if that's what's crazy, man, you guys don't seem very equipped. But I also, in that moment, aside from actually feeling heavier than when I came in. Why? Because not only was another recommendation failing after such a vulnerable situation of admitting it to that therapist, these people had misaccurately represented or experienced what I was experiencing. They said that the spirit of Antichrist came over me like a flood, and now he's not, and I look so much lighter. Well, unfortunately, I'm not. I'm worse off. And even still in that moment, I came home without bitterness in my heart and said, it's fine. It's possible that they just had an off day. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. It's no fault of their own. I do think that there's a responsibility of someone in that position to make sure that what they are saying is accurate, but I cannot expect people to be perfect. So, I've kept going. It's been several years. I didn't die, obviously. I kept going. I actually found a book that was very meaningful to me that woke me up. And my life has turned around overall pretty much better than it ever has been. And that is, and I'm not trying to say this in a harsh way, but no thanks to God. Perhaps there's no way of not saying that harshly. He has not shown up. His voice is still silent. I still don't know he's there. And I've done a lot of reading. I don't have the answers. There's no way that I can ever come to the conclusion that there is no God. If there was such a solution, it would be fantastic to find out. I unfortunately think that that's not going to be the case. But what I have come to the conclusion of that I can't live with myself doing anymore. First, I ran across a book called The Greatest Show on Earth, The Evidence for Evolution, written by Richard Dawkins. Now I know that, you know what, I shouldn't even pander this. He is an atheist. He is very much so against the idea of religion. That does not matter to me if what he states is true. If Charles Darwin was a racist, that does not make his theory for evolution false. It just means he was a terrible person while being a genius. So unless the facts that line up can be disproven, that's what matters. Now, I agree, obviously, your character should not override your genius. I think that that's one of the things that I have come to learn when it came to, I really admired Steve Jobs over the years. I actually don't look up to him anymore. I have no desire to reread his autobiography. Why? Because I don't want to be like him. A man that refuses to call his daughter is not someone that I should aspire to be like, regardless of his genius. I think that your character matters. I think the way that you turn out as a person is more important than what you discover. With that said, I read that book. I was scared to read that book. It was like, okay, well, I've always been on #team creation. And one of the things that had been bothering me a lot recently was the idea that when someone posited a question that was opposing to someone's view, that they would ignore that question or ignore that fact if it was something that disagreed with what they believed. Well, when I came across that book, I had to answer that question now for myself. I had never even studied the theory of evolution, and so I was like, okay, well, I could ignore this book and continue to know what I already know, or I could read it and risk having to change my mind. And when that question came across my mind, then I was just like, great, there's no wrong, there's one right answer for this. Now I have to read the book. And I did. I bought the book. And I even prayed before opening that book and said, God, don't let me go too far. Protect me from any idea that could keep me from you. So, now, I read this book knowing that it's entirely possible that this book could just be not as good as it set out to be. I've had books where reading things that I actually agreed with, where the book was so poorly written that it did a disservice to the argument. So I knew that this book it might very well not prove to me that evolution exists. It could just be someone trying to find a catchy title. Well, unfortunately, that was not the way this book was written. every question that I've ever had or every argument that has ever been stated as a creationist growing up was answered. And the thing that was even more annoying was when I was reading this, a new question would come in my mind. I'm like, okay, that's pretty amazing, but that doesn't explain this. And then the next section would explain that very question that popped in my mind. It was a very thorough, well-explained book. And as of now, I haven't found enough reasons not to believe in evolution. Besides the fact that it's absolutely weird and terrifying to say you believe in evolution, especially when you've always been on the other side. It's always been either evolution or creationism. A friend of mine I've had one friend who was just like, why couldn't both exist? Why couldn't God start that? And that was a crazy question to me because it has never dawned on me until then to think that. Well, why am I sharing this? Well, if evolution's true, which I have strong inklings that it is based on what seems to line up in the data, that's one less thing that God had to do for this world to exist. It's one less thing for him to do. That's fine, Then I fell back on the question, well, someone had to start the spark, that primordial soup that we look for in the Big Bang. Someone had to create that. Something had to be there. Something can't come from nothing. Obviously, that's absolutely ridiculous. And Aquinas' unmoved mover, or the thing that has always existed, the thing that has unlimited potential, that was at least entirely believable by me. There's no way that this universe started without anything. Well, then I came across a physicist named Lawrence Krauss. And I haven't read his book yet, but I've listened to his lectures, and he and Dawkins had a conversation. I'm going to butcher this. I know I'm going to butcher this, but the idea is essentially, for the sake of this conversation, a lot of the negative empty space that is in outer space is not just nothing. For some reason, it has energy. Physicists have been able to examine this, and they call it dark matter. Now, according to the calculations that they have been able to make, it is theoretically possible for this dark matter, given the proper situation, could explode itself and create a Big Bang. So, nothing could come from nothing. That's crazy. So I know that the argument is, well, it's technically not nothing because there's energy there, but it's empty space. There's nothing there. Now you can argue. Now I think it's a fair argument by what do you mean by nothing, and I get it, because then you can just fall back on that argument. Okay, well, what gave that dark matter energy? The reason I'm bringing this up is the more that science and the way we observe the world seems to answer about the way the world works, the less and less there is for God to do in this universe, the less and less there is reasons for him to exist. If God didn't create the Big Bang and it's just started by this empty space exploding on itself, and then God didn't spark all of life and he didn't create every living mammal individually with tender loving care, then what did he do? What was his purpose? So this isn't my argument, but this is like, why do we insist that he continues to exist? And that's a question that I just don't know quite how to answer. It would be quite convenient for me either way, it'd be quite convenient. It'd be extremely convenient if I could find God. But if not, I'm starting to question, why do we insist that he has to exist? Why do we need that warm blanket that we've always had? And so now to the final questions that I have. These are the ones that question God's character. Now, let's just say that I'm willing to put that aside. It does not disprove God. It's entirely possible that he's the one who created the energy. And just because that the energy is probable or possible to create a Big Bang doesn't mean that God didn't spark it. It doesn't mean that God didn't guide evolution to create mankind along the way because he had a purpose of loving them along the way. All of those are obviously probable arguments. So let's just say we allow that. Let's say that this God exists. Okay, fine. This is my last one. And then I'm essentially going to leave this open to what I hope this podcast could bring. Sam Harris makes a really hard argument. I shouldn't even try to requote him or restate him because he says it so beautifully, but it's arguments that I've heard from him. It's arguments I've heard from a granddaughter of the pastor who started Westboro Baptist Church. There's been a lot of people that I've been listening to of people that have criticisms towards the character of God, and it does not add up to me. So let's start with the idea. Where to start? Let's start with the idea of hell. I was talking to my brother the other day, and he made a comment that a friend of his commented that he wished that he would have gotten to spend some more time with our sister. Obviously hinting at the fact that he's attracted to our sister. And I used this as an example of what if we were talking about God? And I said, what if that guy decided to force himself on our sister and we found out about it? What would we do? And it's entirely easy to imagine what we would not prohibit ourselves from doing. We would want to take justice into our own hands. Do not touch my family, you asshole. So let's just say we did that. Him and I kidnapped him. We locked him up in a box and decided to show him who the fuck he was messing with. We take a knife and we start peeling off his fingernails. We take his skin and start ripping it off, sliver by sliver, saying, you messed with the wrong man's sister. How long could we go on before one of us realizes that what we were doing was corrupting our souls? Let's just say we could go a week of non-stop torture. One of us is likely to wake up. And if not one of us, someone who found out about it would. And they would say, you're no better than he. You're no better than he. How could you do such a thing? What he did was absolutely terrible, but you've become a monster in the process. That archetype that calls us to be someone better than who we were harmed by. And we would be called out on it, whether by ourselves or someone who stepped in. And it's only been a week. Yet, if someone has lived for 30 years on this earth, you know what? I'm going to take that. I've done this both ways, but I want to take this as hard as I can take it. If Hitler himself, I don't know how exactly old he was, but let's just say 50 years, got to live 50 years on this earth, and man, he made a mess of it. Now, we could agree that if there was a hell, that he deserves a special spot for it. But we're expected to believe that we could lose our humanity for torturing a man who touched our sister after torturing him for a week. Yet, let's just say Hitler was in hell right now. He's burning. He gets cast into the hottest pit. His skin melts off his face. There are demons portraying every life that he killed and was responsible for killing, and he is haunted by the screams of every one of them. He's haunted by the pain. They can project that exact pain into his soul every moment of every waking day. His skin regrows. It gets hotter. He screams to the point of agony, and it has only been an hour. And then it repeats. And it gets worse. and he sees everyone that he led down there with him, all of his comrades, all of his military, everyone that he led to do something evil is all suffering, and he sees it all, and he sees the weight of his failure, and it's been a week, and his skin regrows again, and his torment is reset. He's not allowed to forget any of it, and just when he thinks, man, what have I done? What have I done? I could not ever do that again. I am a monster. I could never do that again. Lord, let me not ever. Don't let anyone do this again. Let them learn from me. But his cries will not be heard anywhere except in the pits of hell. And when he comes to regret everything he's done, and let's just say that for the sake of argument that he's done that for 1,000 years, and for every moment of every one of those thousands of years, he's learned to regret it. Yet, for some reason, if I tortured a man who touched my sister for a week, it would corrupt my soul. And I'm supposed to believe that a God who is supposed to be all-loving is willing to watch that agony and say, I know it's been 1,000 years, but damn it, you're going to burn forever. You thought this was bad. I'm not going to rescue you from there. Satan is in charge of you, and you will never escape. There is no forgiveness. There is no penance, no posture in which that you can repent. You are doomed forever. And we are supposed to believe that though God did not create hell, he has no ability to overturn that judgment, and that they will burn forever. And for some reason, we are supposed to say, he is a good God. In what world is that good? In what world? Okay, so let's just move on from hell. What about... This is Sam's argument. What about children? What about how do we recognize that God is good? What do we do? Well, we get told God is good whenever something good happens to us. It's very annoying, and I actually tried bringing this up with one of my family members, and they cheated. Because they said, well, God is not good because he got me this thing. God is not good because I got the promotion. God is good all the time. But that's not what you would say if I wasn't framing the argument. But fair enough, let me frame it without someone interrupting. We are told that God is good based on whatever feeling we get. Any good feeling that we have, we are, oh, God is good. I was depressed and he was there. I know he was there. How do you know he was there? Oh, I just know it. I know it. I'm reminded of the fact my grandma said she prayed for me, and that just brought me some warmth to my eyes. I saw the smile on the face of my father before he died, and I knew that he was getting ready to see Jesus. He is good because he comforted them. Apparently 5 million children below the age of 5 die every year. That's 24,000 children a day. It's 1,000 an hour. Now let's just assume that 50% of the world is Christian. 50% of those children, ignoring the fact that the other half were just born on the wrong side of the planet, inconveniently preached about the wrong God. Just setting that aside, let's just assume 50% of them were Christians. That means 2.5 million children, 500 children an hour are being prayed for, and their prayers will not be answered. They will die, and their parents will continue to suffer. They will have the loss of the child, and then we say God is mysterious or God allows free will. Yet for some reason, we take this argument that says, oh, I got a good parking spot. I just could not bear to have to walk in this heat in Western America while I was about to go buy a 24-pack of Pepsi and put it in my refrigerator that I was given with my rent. I couldn't bear to walk into that Walmart for an extra 30 seconds. It's just too far of a parking spot. God, please give me a good parking spot. Because if you're specific when you pray, God will answer. And then guess what? Someone pulls out. Oh my goodness. I cannot believe it. I can't believe it. God gave me a parking spot. He is good. And let's just say we take out the argument that we say that he is good on that moment. It is ignorant of the fact that other people are suffering while you go park in your front row spot to get your Pepsi and put it in your refrigerator and think in your bliss that everything is fine. You think that everything is good and that you are blessed and that you are highly favored. But if your child dies, it would wreck your faith or question it. Why? Because you've come to the realization that you are not immune to the suffering that you thought you were. And so all of that bliss in the front row parking spot would abandon if it happened to you. But when it happens on the other side of the world and you don't see the children, you can easily say God allows free will. But on that argument, back to the free parking spot, back to the get a good mortgage rate. We are to assume that God intervened on free will, that he made someone leave that Walmart a little early. He was going to go buy marshmallows. He actually, in fact, came to buy marshmallows. But then, 2 minutes before, you were praying for that front row parking spot. You were saying, God, please, I can't bear to walk in this heat. Give me a good spot. And then God overrided his free will and said, you will not get those marshmallows. You are going to leave this trip that you came here for because I have a plan for someone else to not have to walk in this heat. Leave, purchase the items you already have in your cart, and go. And then right at that moment, when you pull in, that man in his obedience or overriding of his programming gave you the spot. When things turn good for us, we seem to believe the idea that God overrides free will. When someone becomes a Christian, we seem to think that our prayers magically converted someone's thought process to believe in a God. When someone gets a house as a gift, we seem to think that God forced that person or convinced that person to do something good for you. God posited that idea into that person's head, and let's just say he didn't override their free will, but he strongly urged them to do it, and then turns out something good happened to you. But when something goes bad, for some reason, God is not as useful or coercive. He is not going to posit in that terrorist's idea to stop bringing down the planes. He is not going to stop the man who puts a gun to a child's head or threatens a parent to lose the one that they've been raising. He decides not to be useful. Why? Because he loves us so much that he will not take away our free will. But he loves us so much on the opposite side that he'll take away the free will to give you a parking spot. Am I incorrect in framing it this way? It does not seem to line up to me. It does not seem to line up in any sense that the logic works on both sides. For some reason, we think that God is strongly pushing for the good towards our benefit. But when bad happens to others, God allows free will. And let's just say he did, but that person was so evil that he didn't override. What does that mean? Okay, let me ask you this question. Let's just say that you started an experiment for the sake of science. You wanted to see how people act while knowing they were observed, and you told them, you can do whatever you want. Here's some rules. Please don't kill anyone. Please try to be nice to each other. I'm just going to be watching. And I'm not going to stop you from doing anything. Okay. This is your experiment, and you get to, at the end of it, if you leave with money or whatever, it's all yours. Whatever you figure out how to make of this experiment, it's all yours. Okay. If I'm observing this experiment and I see a psychopath that for some reason passed the screening of this experiment start to smash one of the other people in the face with a baseball bat, or starts to rape one of the women in this experiment, am I really going to keep my word and say, hey, I said that they had free will? I did tell them that they could do whatever they wanted. And in my ability to keep my word, I continue to see. I watch on the cameras as this woman is tortured. Why? At least I'm a man of my word. In any other context, this makes absolute zero sense. It does not work anywhere except for God. For some reason, we can apply benevolence to a God who can, we say he can see everything. And for some reason, he can watch. But for the sake of free will, he doesn't intervene. Now, I overall usually do agree with this argument that if we want, it's the same argument for the idea of free speech. We need to allow for the fanatics to be able to say what they need to say. Why? Because you never know when what you have to say is considered the fanatic opinion. So for the sake of protecting yourself from that dystopian future, you have to allow the people that you disagree with to say something. It protects your future self. I get that. The same argument applies to free will. If you want to say we should have free will, then you have to allow for choices that you might disagree with for the same reasons. But my argument is I just don't understand how someone could watch that and then be considered good. Okay, last thing, and then we'll shut it off. What was brought to my attention was a verse in Romans 9. I am going to read it. I should have had it pulled up. I wish that I could read in King James Version because, I don't know. I hear it's quite good if you can read. I've heard it when people can actually read it well. It's quite beautiful, but I can't read it well, so we are going to go with the NIV version. Forgive me if I'm not reading a translation that you prefer. Okay. So this is talking about the idea of God's promise, being children of the promise, not necessarily children of Abraham. So Paul is talking about this. It is not as though God's word had failed, for not all who are descended from Israel are Israel, nor because they are his descendants are they all Abraham's children. On the contrary, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. In other words, it is not the children by physical descent who are God's children, but it is the children of the promise who are regarded as Abraham's offspring. For this was how the promise was stated. At the appointed time I will return, and Sarah will have a son. Not only that, but Rebekah's children were conceived at the same time by our father Isaac, yet before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls. She was told, the older will serve the younger, just as it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. Okay, we're just going to pause there. There is a child that has not done anything wrong, and God already hates him. We're fine with that? We're okay with that? God hates a child that hasn't done anything wrong? Okay, I'll just keep going. What then shall we say? Is God unjust? Not at all. For he says to Moses, I'll have mercy on whom I'll have mercy. I'll have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. It does not therefore depend on human desire or effort, but on God's mercy. For Scripture says to Pharaoh, I raised you up for this very purpose, that I might display my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. Therefore God has mercy on whom he wants to have mercy, and he hardens whom he wants to harden. Okay, just a little context of what happened in this story. Pharaoh, his heart was hardened by God. Now, what that means, I'm just going to make my best guess. When Moses said, hey, let my people go from being slaves in Egypt, and Pharaoh's heart is hardened, it is God prohibiting Pharaoh from saying yes. Why? Well, as we just read, I raised you up for this very purpose, that I might display my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. Okay, this is like pushing someone off of a cliff and then diving down to save them and saying, look, aren't I a hero? Aren't I a good person? God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And now I know people have said this, and I don't remember what the argument was against this, but it's very, in any other context. So my wife and I were watching American Horror Story. There was a scene, it was quite an interesting season. It was about today's political age, and it had right when Trump became elected. And there was a guy who's a Trump fanatic in this season, and he decides to go up to some random Mexicans and pee in a condom and then throw it at them. And then what do you think they did? They beat the crap out of him because he threw a peed-in condom at them. Rightfully so. Well, he had a camera staged and leaked that footage to the news. Why? Because Trump was right. Mexico's not sending their best people. And that's the headline that took. Now, we watch that, and we are absolutely certain that the reason to believe in this story is absolutely null and void. It is a false setup. The reasons we believe in this story were not honestly portrayed. Okay, so back to Pharaoh. God hardens Pharaoh's heart because, God wants to send some famines and some locusts and some frogs on the Egyptians. He really likes messing with them, and he really wants the Israelites to lose all hope. So that by the time Pharaoh says, fine, take them all. After, by the way, every firstborn son is murdered by the angel of death because there wasn't blood over their door. For some reason, we don't even bat an eye at the idea that these children were murdered by God's will so that he could make his name, I'll say it in his words, I raised you up for this very purpose, that I might display my power in you and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. He murdered children that he might display his power in Pharaoh so that his name could be proclaimed in all the earth. And we're supposed to think that he's a good God. And we're supposed to think that the pretext that the Israelites lost hope in by the time they actually got to leave Egypt, they are so ecstatic. Oh my gosh, there's no way we were going to get out of there. Praise God, we're finally out. The reason they're praising him so hard is because of how difficult it was. The reason it was so difficult was because God hardened Pharaoh's heart in the first place. Who knows? Pharaoh might have let him go after the blood in the river. Pharaoh might have let him go after the frogs. Maybe Pharaoh has a thing that he just doesn't like frogs. But no. His heart was so hardened that it had to lead to his child's death and every Egyptian's firstborn son's death. Why? So that his name could be glorified throughout all the earth. Okay, so this is where it gets dicey. I could be misrepresenting this argument, and I'm happy to hear it. But then Paul actually admits this question. He admits the question that we should rightfully think when a man murders children. One of you will say to me, this is verse 19, one of you will say to me, then why does God still blame us? For who's able to resist his will? But who are you, a human being, to talk back to God? Shall what is formed say to the one who formed it, why did you make me like this?
Does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purpose and some for common use? I've read this verse. As I said, I've gone through the whole Bible, but when this was brought from the granddaughter of the Westboro Baptist Church episode that I listened with Joe Rogan, I'll attach that in the description. When she said that was one of the verses that kind of gave her a red flag of like, what am I doing here? What does this mean? And I could not believe that I had never caught that. I remember thinking, why would God harden his heart? But I remember thinking, he had to have a good purpose for it. I think that's kind of the point. This is one of the biggest points that a lot of like Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris, people that I have been listening to a lot lately, have been criticizing. It seems as if, it's not as if we do bad things and ignore the fact that they're bad. It never even crossed my mind that it was bad. When the man, it's an unnamed man, but he sent out his daughter to be raped by a crowd of people in the Old Testament. It's in Judges, I believe. There was a visitor that the man had in his house, and the crowd said, let him out so we can have gay sex with him. And the guy said, no, please don't do this. I'll send you my virgin daughter and you can do, or no, it wasn't his daughter. I'll send you my virgin concubine. She might not have been a virgin. The Sodom and Gomorrah story does have very similar stories, but lucky for the Sodom and Gomorrah story, they blinded all of the men who tried to rape the woman. This woman was the guy's concubine. He sends her out all night, and guess what? They rape her to death. She shows up at the front door, leaning against it in just bitter pain and sorrow, and then the guy opens the door. Hey, you ready to leave? Hey, are you ready to leave? He nudges her body. Oh my goodness, she's dead. And then he cuts up her body and sends it to the 12 tribes of Israel, being like, this is a travesty. These men in this city are terrible. Yeah, it's a travesty. You sent the woman out to be raped instead of your guest. Actually, I think it was him who was the guest, but it doesn't even matter. You sent her out to be pillaged in the first place. And then for some reason, after they go out and have a war and destroy all of these people. So 24,000 people were murdered because of this, and maybe rightfully so, but I'm assuming 24,000 people didn't rape this woman. So the people who were innocent in this, who didn't play any part in it, I guess sucks to be them because they were born in that city. But when I read that story before even having these questions, it didn't even cross my mind. It's just like, oh, that's sad. That's really sad. Gosh, I can't believe that. And then when justice comes and kills all the 24,000, you're like, yeah, that's right. That's what you get for raping women. And you're supposed to, it doesn't even cross your mind that the host of this house allowed his concubine wife to be raped throughout the night, and that that God didn't stop him, that God didn't convict him with nightmares through the rest of his life to be like, she might not be dead if you wouldn't have done that. So, this is essentially where I'm coming from. I don't understand how we can consider whether this God is real or not. I don't know how we can call him good. It makes me question his character when he falsely represents a reason to praise him. When he allows the rape of a woman for the sake of the dignity of her husband. When he allows the deaths of thousands who are praying to the right God and the deaths of millions who are praying to the wrong one. And assumingly they're probably going to be burning in hell too. He allows the hell to exist, and he allows it to last forever. Let's just say he didn't create it, but it was an automatic reflex of the fact that Satan abandoned God. Why can't God, who's supposedly all-powerful, change the rules of the universe? Why can't he say, you know what? I don't think that they should burn for that long. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that even the most terrible person will learn their lesson after 6 hours of torture and torment. Let's just to allow our own bitterness and vengeance to come out, assuming that God obviously would be immune to that, but let's just say he would allow us to be pleased and say, you know what, we won't let them burn for more than a year, which is still ridiculous. Why couldn't he do that? Why wouldn't he do that? Yet we're expectant and hopeful of the day when Jesus returns so that we can be on the right side of history and say, praise be to God while everyone else burns. I don't know how we can call him good. I just don't. So this is my harsh restatement of some people's arguments, and some of them are my own. But the point is, I don't, if it hasn't become obvious, I can't call myself a Christian anymore. I just can't. Not in this light. Now, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Now, you can give me all the theological arguments as to why my translations of the story are wrong, and that's fine. You might be able to change my mind about whether or not he's a good God. But then I'm still struggling with that same question of whether or not he exists. So that's why I have this episode. That's why I'm trying to do this podcast. I don't quite know what I want to do with this. Part of me is so angry, and so it's terrifying. This is, I've cried with too many people in the last week just talking about what is this going to mean. All of my friends are Christian. My wife is a Christian. My dad is a Christian. Everyone that I know is a Christian besides a select few. What is that going to mean when I say I don't believe? Well, at the very least, they're going to have an arm's length view of me. That my perspective obviously is jaded. That I'm not likely to be someone who they could confide in or look for in advice. Which I'm not even saying that I should. It's entirely possible that my character doesn't match up to someone that is worthy of even giving advice. So, but I know that this is going to cost me. But the question that I feel like I have to, that I can't ignore is, would I be being honest if I said I believed? And the answer is no. The answer is no. I don't. And so this is the predicament that I find myself in. I was talking with someone in my family and they said, well, what if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? It's a gamble. If you die and you go to hell. Okay, yeah. It is. Unfortunately, it is. But I've got another question paired with another one. What if I'm right? What if not? It's not even that I'm right. I'm not even making a claim here. I mean, I guess I'm making a claim that perhaps he's not good. It's possible that I'm praying to the wrong God. It's possible that we've all been praying to the wrong God. It's possible that the God started the universe and he has no interest in us, and then we'll die and there's going to be nothing. There's so many different possibilities. But what if you're wrong? What if there is no Christian God or any God? Let's just say, for the sake of argument, what if there is none? What does that mean? It means that millions of people are living their life on the false assumption of something that brings them false hope, convinces them to do evils and ignore evils. Isn't that a cost? Now, I've in the same conversation, it was like, well, it doesn't matter because when we die, we die. That is not true. This is something that I've talked with some of the closest people that I have. I do not believe that people think that this life is meaningless without God. I think that people would for a moment, but really, let's just say that there was conclusive truth. It was absolutely undeniable that we found out that there was no God. What would happen? Likely people would start raping and pillaging and becoming assholes. Let's just be real. But after that brief moment, I really, really believe that those that lost that hope would come around. And then the rest of us would still believe that it's important on the way that we raise our children, that it's important on how we treat our parents, that it's important on who we become as people, that it is important that we leave this world a better place than when we started, that it is important that we don't lose our souls in the process, that it is important that we can find beauty in life and we can share it with others and try to figure out how to become something more than we were. If you don't believe that that's true, and the only reason you think that that's possible is because a God created it, first of all, I don't believe you. I really don't believe you. Because essentially what you're saying is, oh man, I would love to be out there raping and pillaging. I would love to be just robbing banks galore. The only reason that I don't do it right now is because I know that God's watching. It's the only reason, but don't tell him. Don't tell him. I don't believe that that's the majority of mankind. I just don't. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. But I really don't think that that's what it is. And even if that is, let's just say that there is a benefit to society that being watched, which it obviously does. There's a reason that people behave less badly when police are around. I don't believe that we would fall into anarchy and chaos forever. I think that we would find that we could try to find hope and that we could try to not give in to our deepest, darkest desires. This is not my goal if it is not true. If God is there, my goal is to find that out. If God is not there, my goal is to show that as well. I don't care what the answer, I mean, I guess I obviously care what the answer is because it's a significant question. But I'm not out here to try to make sure that my view that God cannot exist is the answer. That's not the point. That is not where I'm going for. That's not what I want. What I want to know is what's true. So the reason that this podcast is terrifyingly potentially going to be released is, I guess if you're listening to it, it was, obviously, is because I want to have a dialogue. But if you can't tell, I'm pretty anxious about this. I'm pretty upset about it. It's very personal to me. I'm giving up a lot. I'm risking a lot by doing this. I know that if my parents listen to this, which I'm going to ask them to, it's going to cost a lot. But I hope in the process, for my friends and family that are listening, that you can forgive me for my hostility because I don't know the answer. It's just a troubling question. But then also, I hope that you can look at who I am as a person, the way that I treat my family, the way that I treat those around me. I hope that it adds up to something that is admirable. If it doesn't, then that's fine. You can have every reason to judge me. If my character doesn't match up to the goodness that I am trying to be, then by all means call it out. But I'm asking if it does, that you would consider not to keep me at arm's length and not to look at me any different other than a man who has questions and is willing to admit them. So, I feel like I keep trying to say this, but the reason I'm having this podcast, the reason I started it, is called Wrestling with God. That's what I want to do. You're welcome to let's talk. Let's talk about where I'm wrong. Let's talk about the questions that caused you to leave the church. Let's talk about where I could be right. Are there reasons that God doesn't exist? Are there reasons that he does? Are there questions that you had that you were on the brink of leaving that kept you going? I'd like to hear them. Now, I might laugh. I might mute my laugh. I might be skeptical. I might ask questions because I'm extremely skeptical at this point. But if you'd brave that territory with me, well, I know that I would appreciate it. It would be nice to be able to talk about this freely and in a non-hostile way, and that we could still have dialogue about it as friends after. So I would like to open up a dialogue about this subject. Is God real? Is he good? Why do you know? And you cannot say faith. If you say faith, fine, but it doesn't add anything to the conversation. So, that's where I'm at. I appreciate you listening. And to my friends and family, I do love you. So a lot of these questions have been on my mind for quite a long time, and I just wanted to open up the conversation about it. This is something that is predominantly on my mind as of now, and I'd love to talk with people about it. So I wanted to extend the invitation to anyone who might be listening. If you'd like to tell me that I'm flat out wrong, you have wrestled with these thoughts, you agree with me, what has or hasn't kept you to stay within the faith? I'd love to talk about this. I'll let you set the ground rules. If you want it to be a debate, if you just want it to be a conversation or picking each other's brains, it's completely up to you. If you would like to have a conversation like this, you can reach out to me at facebook.com/wrestlingwithgodpodcast and just message me on that. So I'd love to have this conversation with anyone who's willing.